abortion as a dog whistle, a device to actually maintain power for a very small number of people, white patriarchy in a changing world. And that is the lie, and it has to be exposed.
So just following up on that, I have this sort of not crazy idea that I think is shared, which is that in point of fact, they don't care at all about abortion, about women's health, reproductive rights. And the last thing they want is to actually win on it, because it is actually a tool that they use to control voting behavior, to push a huge agenda that has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with an oligarchy, a bunch of a small amount of rich people who control, as much of our lives as possible. So the question in there is, do you think they want to win on this, or is it just a tool that they use to control?
I think there's a spectrum, and we write about in the books sort of categories of people. We write about the movement architects who quite intentionally built a Trojan horse around the idea of anti-abortion sentiment as a litmus test for being willing to roll back social progress in other ways, workers' rights, gender and racial equity. It worked really well for them to use abortion as a device to identify those people. We talk about GOP establishment, now a wholly owned subsidiary of the radical right, but also very cognizant as people who have to win elections that they are on the wrong side of this issue. And therefore they're trying to walk this tightrope of feeding the base, but also not, I always say now they're like the dog that caught the car. And they don't know what to do about it. And then the third segment are the true believers. They spent decades feeding disinformation and propaganda to a young generation of radicals who really do believe in many ways that abortion is the center of all evil. But even those folks have a really healthy overlay with white nationalists, people who have antipathy towards racial justice, as well as just straight up misogynists, people who believe men should be in charge of the family, our economic systems, our social systems, and our political systems.
Well, Paul Weyrich is a fascinating character in this book. Could you tell us more about him?
Yeah, he is like the guy that I think people need to know, and sometimes we artificially divide our movement between people who work on economic justice and people who work on gender and racial justice. Paul Weyrich is the perfect indication of why we should never fall into that trap. Mm-hmm. He is the godfather of the movement, and he called himself a dominionist, which meant white men should rule, God-given right to rule over all systems of power, good friends with the Coors. They funded a lot of his work. And he built ALEC, which I assume a lot of your listeners know about, your viewers know about, which moves the corporate agenda. But he also moved this sort of infrastructure around social agenda, right? So he helped build Americans United for Life. He helped build the Federalist Society as a means to create a buttress for popular opinion to intrude on his agenda by capturing the courts. One of the most fascinating stories we tell in the book about Paul Weyrich is that he addressed a convention. It was an all-male convention in the mid-90s, and he was pissed. He was honestly just totally frustrated. And the reason he was pissed is because he found the movement, the next generations that he had trained, to be way too focused on banning abortion and using reproductive oppression as against women and pregnant people, when he had this whole agenda about supremacy and propping up the white patriarchy, and he felt they had lost sight of their ultimate goal. And that is it's the curtain raiser on the book, but it is one of the most stunning moments. And actually, a young evangelical man was so shocked by what he heard that he writes about walking up to Weyrich afterwards and being like, "Did I hear you right?" And Weyrich was like, "You absolutely heard me right. This is a question about control, and we got to get back to that."
Well, and I think it's really everything you're saying and you write about. I'm again, thank you for doing this, because these ideas are not intuitive and they're new, even to pro-choice activists, women like me. It's easy to forget that these aren't all nice soccer moms who just really believe in pregnancy. Most of it is really, really sinister.
Look, I mean, I do think there are lots of people with lots of feelings about what happens in pregnancy, right? But the truth remained in the 60s, throughout the 70s, as it does now, that even some people who have ambivalence about what they might do in the situation of an unintended pregnancy absolutely believe that this is not a decision for politicians to make who know nothing about your life. It is ultimately the decision of the people affected. And but what they banked on, and I think this is really interesting, is that when they chose abortion, and let's be clear, the radical right was mobilized to politics in the late 60s, early 70s, fighting school desegregation.
Mhm.
That is the first time they invoked the term religious liberty, which we now know in withholding contraception from women, or making sure that bakers don't have to bake cakes for gay weddings. Oh my God, that is just like what would happen then, you know? But at the time, they used religious liberty as a way to keep their kids from having to go to school with Black kids. They didn't land on abortion as a device, a dog whistle. We call it a Trojan horse around which they were able to move this repressive agenda until the late 70s. And it didn't even take hold until the mid 80s through lots of propaganda and disinformation. But what they banked on, and I think this is really important and goes to your question, is that we have all of these really deep-seated feelings about women and our role in society, and the stigma that they banked on keeping the majority silent so they could implement this agenda was not actually around abortion. It's about women who have sex outside of the desire to procreate, women who get pregnant and are so selfish that, oh my God, it might not be the right time in their life. And certainly there is a racial overlay on that Reagan stoked like crazy about single moms and the denigration of the family. And all of that converged in a way that kept the majority silent, because we don't even understand our own internalized stigma around this. And we certainly didn't want to talk about it. It's not conversation for polite company. So part of the goal of the book is to say, we've been duped for long enough. We have to unpack this in order to understand it, and we have to break the silence in order to beat it.
So let me ask, because on something that you said about the silos, that, women's health and reproductive justice, and it's over here. And then there's the Medicare for all is over here, and then economic justice is over here, and environmental justice. The whole point of Solidarity Live is to say that what we need to do is, in solidarity, gather all of us together and remember our unstoppable power when we do that. That the reason that the oligarchs, the rich, Wall Street, private equity barons slice and dice us is that we're less powerful that way, and they can just pick us off. So what I want to do, that's what we need to do here. And I think your book is a critical part of the infrastructure of doing that. But talk about how they do it. How does Trump wield this now, using the stigma, using the fact that they can, shame people into not talking about this? How did Trump grab this? I mean, just Trump is not a true believer. I don't think he fits into any of those three buckets. He's just a con man, but he
Trump
has
is a true believer in his own power. It's
yes.
a symmetry with them.
And he has he's like a savant at that part, right? Like, and because he doesn't care about anything, he's not ideological, consistent or anything, but he got this, and he wields this part of his base very effectively. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen there, if you learned anything about how that works?
Yeah, Trump is the ultimate manifestation of what was put into motion, 45 years ago. And I think Paul Weyrich would be really thrilled to see that Trump, he passed in 2008, that Trump actually didn't overly focus on abortion, although he recognized it as the litmus test for power within the GOP. But in fact, he has surfaced the underlying racism and misogyny in our country. In fact, we track in the book how Trump's unlikely rise to power was fueled by this sort of three prongs of the cultural undercurrents. One was the traditional anti-choice movement. They were important. He was transactional with them. He gave them what they wanted. We're seeing that now, that they poured money and resources in there. The second were white nationalists. He unapologetically stoked white nationalists who are, like not knocking on doors, but are actually really out there online and filling the stadiums for him. And then these men's rights advocates. And this is sort of the new version, the 21st century version of straight up misogynists. Guys who believe that feminism have destroyed their lives. They're responsible for online harassment and stalking of online feminists. They gave us Gamergate, and they were mobilized to political power, much like segregationists were early in the 70s. They were mobilized to political power by seeing a reflection in Trump of someone willing to put women in their place, right? And so what Trump has shown is you can be overt in a way people didn't believe. The movement architects and the GOP operatives who were always trying to walk this tightrope of fomenting this stuff, but not being so overt. And Trump actually showed you could move the goalposts on it and win. Now, let's be clear. Trump's win and what has happened subsequently also feeds into Weyrich strategy, because they always knew if you don't have popular opinion, you gotta suppress democracy. So court capture, voter suppression, gerrymandering, these were all really important prongs of the overall plan that are metastasizing now. And that's why we always say, no matter what issue you work on, if you're not actually fighting for democratic reform where everybody has a voice in the system, we all lose.
Well, and Ilyse, I know we only have you for a limited time, but I'm so excited about your book, and I'm buying it for all my female activist friends, because I do think it's really everything you're saying is.
Will you buy it for your male activist friends too?
Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. What am I saying? They're the ones who need it more. But it is interesting, though. I think that even everybody who is in this movement, and it's something that I fall prey to all the time, it's easy to forget where all this is. This is coming from the same place upstream. It's not an accident. It can feel like an overwhelming, chaotic, like sensational thing. How do you, if you were going to have 10 minutes with someone, what would you tell them is the best place to put their energy? Because we're in such an important time politically right now.
You know what? I mean, our fundamental sort of conclusion from the book is that they bought our silence, and silence is complicity. So, I'm an organizer. I try and organize people from whence they come and whatever tactics is most comfortable for them. But we always say breaking that silence right now, unpacking this Trojan horse that has been so effective for them, fighting disinformation, which we know works on a peer-to-peer level, right? Like calling it out. We do trainings with our members to spot disinformation and combat it in their own social media networks. But it starts with breaking the silence, because they have bought our silence for so long, and that is how they have succeeded.
Yeah, they really have. Thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to have you on, and everybody go read this book. It really is incredible. And Ilyse, you're incredible. Thank you for spending your time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me on. I loved it. Thanks for all you do at Solidarity Live. It's awesome.
Thanks, Ilyse. So and again, the book, The Lie That Binds, you can find it at Barnes & Noble. You can find it at my favorite, bookshop.org. You can find it at my actual favorite, which is your local bookstore. You can Google it and find it, but just buy it and read it, because what we are trying to do at Solidarity Live, what Jocelyn and I always do, is trying to unpack it, trying to peel back the layers and show how the rotten core are the same players. It's these hedge fund billionaire types, and it's them and Paul Weyrich and Phyllis Schlafly and the Coors family. Yes. But it's like that big money always finds these horrible people, and then they partner, and they're like, which is basically what happened with Trump. Trump's not big money, his pretend big money, but the billionaire class, they were betting on Ted Cruz. So they found this horrible person in him. And then when Trump started winning, they were like, okay, let's connect to him. And it's the same fight.
I love, I mean, I wish our show was all day, every day for 8 hours, right, Brad? But because there's so much to talk about. But it's really, even for me, you know, like Alex, we've been talking and reading and doing these things for decades. And it still blows my mind that there are essentially like 4 Batman villains. This
Yeah.
is, and it's so because the left isn't like that. Like we don't, you know, George Soros exists, but he's not actually behind the curtain calling all the shots the way.
Yeah.
Why don't people get that?
And it's they need more, and there's a moral and I think probably psychological as well sickness in them that they are addicted, right? I mean, like that. I think one of the biggest symptoms I have of like shitbaggery or whatever it is that they make all, and then they're like, I'm going to space. Like, you're not going to space, bro. You're not going to space.
Oh
No, Jeff Bezos, you're not going to space, and no, you're not going to destroy this planet. And then it's like, right, that's literally their conception. They're like, oh, well, I'm just going to leave and go somewhere else and build, you know, the perfect society, their libertarian island. And sometimes I'm like, man, it would be nice to have all of them, put them on a plane and fly them to an island and let them function by their own rules for a while. They would die of dysentery quite quickly with you know, unclean sanitation. So it's just amazing to me that it's hard for people to believe what's right in front of them when you can find the same billionaire players pulling the strings by just pouring money into this system. And my last thing on the Soros check, my favorite part of that is like thinking that George Soros is this lefty guy. Like, yes, he pushes democracy and he, you know, hates fascism and communism. That's what that dude hates. But he's a hedge fund guy. He's not a lefty, you know. And the people on the board are in limousines, and he's just a weird investor. Like he's the oddball out. The vast majority of the people who make money like him actually then go this other way. They go the Wayreich way, the Shafley way, the Coors way. I'm blanking on the names of the family that supported Ted Cruz and then moved over to
Koch
Donald.
brothers?
Well, those two are perfect as well.
Although like, I don't think they're Trump people, are they?
They're not. But this is why it's like when we're talking about this and we're focused on it, I want to bring it to, this is why we're in such a terrible place right now. Like, because we can't believe that there are, you know, a dozen super selfish people who are just destroying everything and have this fantasy that they're going to take a rocket to Mars after they destroy everything.
Well,
it's hard
and you know,
for people to believe.
I think I've been thinking about this a lot in our current plague times. I think it's just so anxiety inducing to really accept that. And I get it. I mean, I personally would rather believe that Bezos is a benign billionaire and he's going to like set up all these great hospitals and these great rainforest saving thing. It's like anytime one of those people do anything vaguely charitable, everyone jumps all over it. See, these are not supervillains. These people care about us. All is not lost. The people who argue for the existence of billionaires fascinate me psychologically almost as much as the billionaires themselves. Have you run into these people, Alex? It's interesting.
Of course. I think the multiple things, and I want to hear what you think, but I think at a root of not understanding someone like the Mercers are the ones who backed Ted Cruz and then Donald Trump, more so than the Koch brothers, is not understanding how much money we're talking about.
Yes.
Just a full, like, multiple orders of magnitude misunderstanding of what $1 billion is, and then what $100 billion is. Like that you could make the median wage for millions of years and not ever equal the wealth of Jeff Bezos. Without the full comprehension of how much money we're talking about and how unequal the division is, it's hard for people to believe, because they're like, oh, that sounds like a Batman villain.
Well, and I think it's I've been thinking about this a lot too. So Sanjeev and I talked about this on the show last week. I made this Facebook status that I cannot stop thinking about. I asked people, what do you think makes someone wealthy or privileged? Because I was just curious, like, what do different people think of as wealthy? And I was shocked by the low answers. Some of them were like, if you have 2 months saved, or if you make $70,000 a year. And all I can think about when I see stuff like that is like, Americans are so gaslit that the basic middle class income that is $70,000, because honestly, can you actually like have kids on a household of 70K? Sure, but like it's going to be rough, you know? But so much of America is so poor and so underpaid that we are just so dissociated from what that level of wealth would look like. Like when we're talking about our socialist utopia, we're not necessarily saying that you can't have $20 million. But that's a lot of money. How much more do you need than $20 million, right? Like, but billions is like, I own the planet level money. And I think that because wages are so stagnated, people are in so much trouble, basic housing and basic healthcare have become luxuries. We are just so psychologically detached from what that amount of wealth would look like. Do you feel like that too?
I think it's a strategy of theirs as well, because if people did recognize, it's fundamentally true that the United States of America right now is the richest country in the history of the world. But if you ask people that, there's like some quibbling, because maybe ancient Mali was,
well,
but
of course.
it was very difficult to actually figure out wealth back then, right? Like we didn't have global
we didn't have like return on investment and stuff like that.
Or actually you just didn't know who had what, right? So but anyways, in modern times, and also our $19 trillion GDP, I bring this up all the time, versus a trillion, 19 or 21 trillion depending. These are massive disparities. But if you ask most people, and there's survey data on this, they don't believe that to be true. That no, we are not the richest country in the history of the world, because most of that wealth is actually accumulated in a very small amount of hands. And so we're the richest country in the world. People who fly into other countries, they look at airports in other countries.
Me at an early age, we're both service industry veterans. We lived the lifestyle. So like, I had all my waiting and line cook friends who are here from the DR or any other number of allegedly developing countries. And we talk and, you ask, like, do you miss home? And they will always say the thing I miss about home is you don't work as hard, because wage equity in these, again, allegedly developing countries is typically better. Like maybe you make less, but you can still afford to live without working 3 or 4 jobs, which is what people do in this country. And I think it's just the thing that I cannot get out of my head on a daily basis is the fact that we have a class of people, of which I was a part of for many years, where you're literally working like 14, 16-hour shifts to not even be able to make rent. And then you have a class of people who's so rich, they can literally do whatever they want. They could buy the entire planet if they want, and they don't pay taxes. And we're okay with that. Like, how many jobs as a waitress should you have to work before you're able to reasonably feed yourself? What is the answer for people? And it shocks me that people are just fundamentally okay with it. What is that?
And now what we're seeing is a lot of crumbling of that, because the superstructure built around it was always a lie. like that this is sustainable, that this way of life is sustainable, that that this system is sustainable, that it doesn't have inherent contradictions and it won't fall in on itself. And each time the cracks started appearing, we actually just doubled down on the stupidity, right? Like when Wall Street tanked the global economy, in the answer to that, like literally the answer, and remember, Obama was the president when we, got the car out of the ditch, was his metaphor that he always used. But not a single banker went to jail. Not a single banker. Not one of these guys who criminally crashed the world economy. And in fact, what we did was we turned on a money fire hose into their wallets and we're like, please fix the thing that you broke. And now we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to do the same thing when it comes to what the coronavirus or COVID has done. But 20 are like off the charts. They don't even make charts that go high enough for it.
Went to the Hill doing this press conference about senators. So they're always a little busy looking, but I kind of felt for these guys because we have a national economy that is on the brink of a generationally defining recession. We have a literal plague.
It's not on the brink though. It's
True.
Just, it's
True.
propped up by the cocaine of disbelief. It's just fake. What has happened to the economy and everything? Because the senators are stressed. They should be stressed. And I love the work that those two are doing on this stuff. But the workers who've been out of the job right now they're taking away the $600.
Yes.
That is the only thing that has been propping the whole system up. They're literally right now down the street on the Hill. They're taking it away because they're thinking, the Republican and Donald Trump's thinking, and this the four stooges of the apocalypse, Stephen Moore, Kudlow, forgot his name, Navarro, and Donald Trump, that you need to take people's money away from them and then they'll rush into the burning building, which is the country with the coronavirus, and start working again. Instead of putting out the fire like other countries have done, they're trying to take people's money away and be like, go, go, go. You rush into the fire. Go on.
And I love that you say fire because that's how I saw this map on Facebook, and it was meant to just be like a sort of absurdist meme. Like, oh, look, these are all the countries we're not allowed to go to now. And it's the entire world because the entire world took care of this in a timely way. And that is what, this has been psychologically difficult for all of us, I think, in a number of ways. But at this point in the process, I think what's really difficult for me to wake up every morning with is the fact that if our government were even basically competent, even basically at a very minimum level concerned for the health of its citizens, this would be over by now because it is over in a lot of different parts of the world. And we are now, it's almost August. It's August in 4 days.
And I try not to be too much of a bummer because the public health side of me, where I studied pandemics, because I was working in HIV clinics and I came to DC to work on pharmaceutical better. But it's at the point in the US where it's not positive we can get over it. So viral outbreaks feed on themselves. It's possible to lose control of a viral outbreak. And, when Donald Trump yesterday, he pointed at a map and he's like, oh, doing pretty good. Unless you look south, are done. But at least north and east are not. But it's also a misunderstanding of how it works. If Florida becomes an epidemiological pump where the virus, the outbreak rages for out of control, you can't, unless you seal it off and don't let people out of there, it keeps, no matter where you get it under control, where it's out of control will just keep coming into your neighborhood. So we are past any sort of brink. We are deep, 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 deep into a chasm that has never been seen before. Unemployment numbers never been seen before. Pandemic, the likes that maybe 18 1918, we saw something similar. But all of those together, and literally what they're arguing about right now on Capitol Hill is how are they going to cut Social Security in return for some smaller check to keep people from dying on the street, but not too big that they won't rush back into the burning building to keep the machines going to be a bulwark on these billionaires' portfolios. That's where we are.
Economic situation. This whole year has been a mental health trauma for pretty much every normal person, because it is one thing to know your government doesn't care about you. It's another thing to know your government doesn't care about any of us. You know, I think we're in the activist community. We do a lot of work of like, you know, this issue is bad. This issue is bad. But now it's like on Facebook, and it gets me really frustrated. Like, oh, do you actually know anyone with COVID? Like, yeah, I can name like 15 people that I'm legitimately friends with who have had COVID. And it's scary. It's not like the flu. It's really, really, really difficult.
Age out with you. It's fun.
Please. This is so nice. This is my therapy.
So
thank you for being here, audience.
The two things is one, it's just like the flu is, you know, physical violence is never a like good response to things, but man, does it make me want to reach through the computer screen and slap people. Like there's nothing like the flu about this.
Yes.
So there's two things, mortality and morbidity, right? Like how much people die from something and then how much it harms them. And people are like, oh, the more people. So, 1%. Well, what's 1% of the entire population? So mortality people are idiots in their own way, being like, oh, it's only 1%. 150,000 people are dead who wouldn't have been dead otherwise. So it's a hugely important thing to remember that this virus kills people. But the morbidity stuff is where it's mind-boggling to me that people aren't more afraid of this, that we do not know. Our entire knowledge of this thing is months old, and we're still learning new things that it does. Oh, it's a respiratory thing. Oh, actually, it's a respiratory and a GI thing. Oh, actually, it's a multi-organ systemic viral infection that attacks the brain, the eyes, the heart, all of these. Oh, and also it's a clotting thing, and people have strokes from it, and all of the harm. So the herd immunity idiots are but then, you know, it'll be over. And you're like, no, it won't be over.
No.
People who got sick and harmed might face a life. What do you think it will do to our system, which was creaky and terrible, heart, multi-system issues that are going to keep them from going back to work? How good is it going to be for our economy? Degree burns. Oh, they didn't die. It's just third-degree burns. Do you know how stupid that is? Yes, mass death is never good for the economy. Finally, Zach Carter wrote that one. But mass harm is likewise never going to be good for the economy. There's no balancing the scales there. The only thing you can fire. How do we not have to wear masks? Put out the fire.
Yeah.
Stadium that's on fire.
It's so simple. Like literally all that we would have to do is cut mass stimulus checks to everybody. And that is a drop in the bucket financially compared to what this government is willing to do to line the pockets of people like Jeff Bezos. And that is where you said the well-being of innocent Americans on the altar of billionaires and increasingly trillionaires. We're about to have trillionaires. If billionaires shouldn't exist, trillionaires should triply not exist. But that's, I mean, and you know, again, this gets back to our own gaslit.
1,000. Let's do. 1,000 times should not exist. A billion.
All right, that's true.
Right?
Mathematically inaccurate.
It's one of those ones that I do think if we talked about things in thousands, it would help. Think of $1,000 and how much you would love to just have $1,000. And then keep multiplying by 1,000. You think about $1 million. Oh my God.
That's a lot.
1,000 millions is $1 billion.
Yes.
1,000 billions is $1 trillion. The magnitude of it are just, they're mind blowing. And it's really hard to do mathematically. Sorry, I cut you off for
no, but it's important because again, we have people, you know, I was on the phone with my best childhood friend yesterday. It was a social worker. So I don't need to tell you she's not making a ton of money. And she's freaking out about the difference between a couple $100s here and there. And, you know, what a stimulus check would mean to her household and her partner who was furloughed because of COVID. Just, it's disgusting to me that there are so many complicated things in the world, but the solution to COVID wasn't actually that complicated. Stimulate the economy, make sure, you know, cancel rent, cancel student debt, give everybody a minute to breathe, shut everything down, and it's over. And that isn't what happened.
In fact, the like absolute idiocy of it all is what they're talking about right now. And like, oh, well, we don't want to pay people to not go to work for just a short amount of time, while also mandating mask wearing for 28 days. And this thing is over. Unemployment in Germany never crested 4%.
Oh my God.
Because they just paid people not to work.
That hurts my head.
They are driven by science, by public health. And there were mistakes made across the board, right? Like always, because it's a novel coronavirus. But like in this country, it's something like, oh, well, they didn't get it all right on day one, so I'm going to do nothing at the scientists.
And that's what's weird to me. I mean, why? Like, finally, Trump started wearing a mask. Like, what was that? Like, this dude was literally out here at non-socially distanced press briefings, just like, yeah, man, I'm here for it. I'm here for COVID. Like, it's almost like there's a level.
Also, he's the best who comes into contact with him. They're all tested every single day with rapid tests that deliver. Out in America, you can't get a test in 10 days. You can't get the results. In the White House, you get them in minutes. And then he goes out there and is like, I'm the big guy. I'm not scared of this virus. And you're like, you are tested for it every day.
That is crazy. How did I not know that?
Sorry, I cut you off again.
I mean,
is not sufficient to what is doesn't rise to the crisis right now. But it is the high water mark. It was passed in May. It's just been sitting there. The Republicans now, so unemployment is done today. Everyone will stop getting that $600. And so if they moved today, miraculously, we're like, oh shit, we're going to get it and passed it. You would still have an interruption of both people getting unemployment and how much, so the people who qualify for it and how much they get. That's done. It's baked in. People are going to, and then all sorts of things about being able to be evicted and all these things run out. And there's going to be a gap. The senators just ensured, Mitch McConnell just ensured that that'll happen. So I want more than heroes. I think everyone who is looking at the magnitude of the crisis does as well. But at the same time, they're talking, so here's about $3 trillion. The Republicans are talking about $1 trillion, and they're arguing right now about which way to cut Social Security in order to give people their crumbs so that they don't starve and die on the street, but also are willing to rush back into the burning building to do their job. So, like, we have to pass the HEROES Act, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. Stuff that other countries, we're the nervous laughing stock of the world on. Like, HEROES is the first one that has real PPE, personal protective equipment, real money to ensure that our frontline workers have masks and gowns. We have nothing right now for that. We rushed to get billionaires as much money as possible, but God forbid the nurses and doctors and medical staff and janitors and service staff are able to protect themselves from getting sick.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid the stock market. Yeah.
So here's where it is, just because we're talking from the middle. Heroes passed the House. The debate in the Senate right now is about the Republican offer. So the Democratic is passed in the House, but in the Senate, there's no, which is held by the Republicans. There's no. It's all done today. They ran out of time, and they still don't even know what their plan is. And there's disagreements between the White House and the Republicans in Senate right now. That's who's debating right now.
I mean, it's really shocking. Mitch, I mean, look, everyone who hates Donald Trump is absolutely justified, but Mitch McConnell needs a lot more shade thrown his way, because the way that man has run this, where do you go from evil? But it's evil. It's just a total willingness to watch the country burn under his act for no apparent gain to himself. I mean, I guess financial, but not even in such an exorbitant way where you're like, oh, that makes sense. I would be bought off for that sum of money. Like, no, Mitch McConnell is like a normal millionaire. He's not like a Bezos level rich. Mostly he's just evil. He's like, you know what? I see all these people dying. I see all these people unemployed. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to chill.
Look, I'm not saying that he had, but it's his altar of skulls and blood, and he's like, blood for the blood god. I'm not saying that exists, but I've never seen things that will result in astronomical harm to everybody in this country except for a sliver of billionaires.
Just because we can't confirm it doesn't mean we can't repeat it.
Prove that it doesn't exist. That's
yes, exactly.
On you. That's on you, Mitch. Prove that it doesn't exist.
History, because I really don't understand what these people are getting out of this. If you want to be a millionaire, right? There are ways to become a millionaire that are way more ethically sound than these Republican senators and all the creepy, shady levels of maliciousness that go into dismembering this country. And, there are people who will say, oh, well, America has always been bad. And that's very true. I'm not trying to minimize that. But there was also a level at which people believed in the middle class not that many generations ago that's just gone. This idea that middle class, normal Americans are entitled to, access to work, access to housing, access to basic healthcare. That's just gone. It's literally the Hunger Games out here.
And in fitting with our show's theme, the only way that we defeat the Hunger Games is with solidarity. When they divide up the people into their districts, and then they keep them fighting amongst themselves, they can't actually then focus on the problem, which is this oligarchic capital elite, to keep with the Hunger Games theme. But it's in solidarity when we stand together, working folks, and we say, we're not going to let you slice and dice us up into our little silos. Racial justice is economic justice. Economic justice is reproductive justice. Reproductive justice, you get the point. Solidarity. When we stand together, we can beat these guys. And also, it's important not to overestimate our opponents. So, yes, there probably is the altar of skull. It's on you to disprove it, Mitch. But also, they lose a lot too, right?
True.
They got crushed in 2018. They get crushed. So we right now have to stop them from destroying everything, so that we can get power and we can build a future that we're proud of. We can destroy the extractive industry's stranglehold right now. We can destroy the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies' stranglehold on the political system now. We have an opportunity, and we have to raise our voices together in doing that. We have to stand in solidarity against the fascist shock troops that are being dropped into cities around the country to start violence. That's what Donald Trump is doing. He's trying to start a fight like he did that, Jocelyn, you were in when he picked a fight with you, with troops.
I take that shit personally. Every time, I love my NPR, okay? I've got got it on at all times. And every time I hear about that Lafayette Square thing, I get mad. Like this wasn't shooting at protesters. He was shooting at me. And I take that very personally. I didn't do anything. I was just there with our camera and Will and Kimon. And it is, I know this is goofy. I know that it's bad that there was any faith I had left in my government, but it is still fundamentally shocking to watch the Attorney General march out, whisper something to a bunch of brown shirts, and start getting shot at. It is a life-changing experience because, again, you know,
yellow shirts and a bunch of dads with leaf blowers. And it's like the true power of the people is summed up there. You have a handful of soldiers in military gear with machine guns and everything, shooting military grade tear gas at these protesters who are moms and grandmoms lined up, and they were the brown shirts. But now we can't quiet down. We have to be louder now than we were yesterday.
Yeah.
We have to never believe that, it's not worth fighting for, because it's our political system. It's not theirs. They stole it from us, and we have to take it back. So call both your senators, your representative, and tell them that they work for you. Call the Capitol switchboard, 202-224-3121. Get connected to your members and tell them that you don't want to bail out Wall Street again. Tell them that you want our money coming to us. Pass heroes right now. Don't water it down. In fact, pass more than heroes. Pass heroes plus a Masks for All bill. I want all of that. If they want schools open safely, put out the fire before trying to get people to send their children into a burning schoolhouse. But never give up. Never give up. Even when things seem super bleak, we can all recognize bleakness and give us.
No.
But we need to do that too. We need to be in the street in spite of the Republicans who hold so much power right now. We will get through this in spite of the billionaires who are trying to turn us into cannon fodder to protect their portfolios. We will not let Jeff Bezos go to Mars. We're going to take all of that, and we're going to, when we stand together in solidarity. Jocelyn, I can't believe it's been so long since we got to do this together. So why don't you close us down with your final words of wisdom to keep us until next week?
I mean, how do I shut down after this? Now I want to keep talking, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Please do go buy Ilyse's book, The Lie That Binds. It's wonderful. And it's, as we talk about on here all the time, these are not separate siloed issues. They're things that if we stand into solidarity together, and if we stay focused on creating a new system that doesn't literally kill working class people for sport, we will have a much better, more beautiful world. And we'll see you guys next Friday.